Hi everyone, this is your second pro-con analysis video. This one is on the evidence weaknesses. If you recall from the last video, we went over this pro-con argument. You can click on it here and you'll see it looks like that. And this is your copy, your digital copy. And I told you that all the hyperlinks are active if you wanted to investigate any of these hyperlinks. And what we did last time is basically we went over the answers for identifying the evidence. Now I'm going to do the same thing today, except instead of identifying the evidence, the evidence has already been identified. So you have your answer sheet attached to your last analysis, and we're going to go through each of those pieces of evidence. And what we're going to do is we are going to look at the potential, not necessarily actual weaknesses, that are attached to those specific types of weaknesses. So the notes for this part of the lesson went over each of the 10 types of evidence and talked about the most likely potential weaknesses attached to them, not that they're there, as well as a highlight of some of the general weaknesses like ambiguity and assumption logical fallacy. Luckily, our argument this semester doesn't have any of those, so we're going to just focus on those very specific weaknesses. Same as last time, you want to watch this video and you might want to open the video in one tab, your assignment in another tab, and as you listen to the video, you can pause and play and you can write down your own answers. Again, I've given you the sample from Jen from last semester, or I'm sorry, from a number of semesters ago. Here she has identified the evidence from last time, and then in red she's listed out the potential weaknesses in them. So you can do something similar in your text box. You can add a table if you want. You can write the two respondents and then list out the evidence with their weaknesses, or you can just list it out however you like. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stop sharing so I can now share my PDF, which is the answer sheet that you will find attached to your assignment once you've turned it in. Again, the answer sheet, the links are not hot, only on the original document that I linked you to. The first time, your first video, I read through the entire pro-con and talked about some various things like why things are in quotes and things like that. I'm not going to do that now because we've already done it once, and I'm just going to focus in on the evidence that we identified last time and talk about those potential weaknesses. So we'll go ahead and get started with Devin Kurtz. Remember, he is answering in the affirmative that yes, camping bans are an effective strategy to answer or to address homelessness. How does he know? His first piece of evidence we said was this statement here, according to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, between 2018 and 2023, the United States saw a 32% increase in the number of homeless people living on the street, nearly twice the increase in homelessness overall. We identified that as data and statistics. What do we need to look for? Well, data and statistics both can be weakened by a lack of absolute numbers and proportions. They also can be weakened by proving one thing but supporting another, or it's unrelated, right? Or the statistic could be confusing the mean. But neither of those are at play here with this type of data and statistic. Devin's second piece of evidence was the research study where he cited a statistic based on research opinion, or expert opinion, I'm sorry. He says researchers published in the Journal of Experimental Criminology found that less than 1/3 of individuals living on the street who are offered services or treatment accept those options. So with a research study, there are a couple things that go on. First of all, we typically don't know, I don't know why that's doing that, I apologize, go away. Oh, poop. There we go. With research studies, we always want to know about how the research study was designed, what their sampling was. It was random sampling, how big the sample was. So we would have to look deeply into the research study. And again, I told you last video, this is a very dense thing to read. The other thing we'd want to know is if there's any bias related to that research study. In other words, who paid for the study? Is there a political bias, a financial bias, a cultural bias, that sort of thing? So that's what the research study. In terms of the statistic that he reports out, again, in this case, this statistic is potentially weakened by the lack of absolute numbers or proportion. Now, he's not reporting a mean, so we don't have to worry about confusing the mean. The third possible weakness, based on Ratcliffe and White as the expert's authority, they could be questionable authorities. We would have to look deeply into the research study, look at their credentials, their potential biases, whether they're being, financially supported by one political, cultural, social group that might cause them to interpret the data in a certain way. Moving on to his third piece of evidence, again, it's another research study where he reports out statistic and expert opinion. Same thing, research published in JAMA International Medicine found that unsheltered homeless individuals have 10 times the mortality rate of the adult population, 3 times the mortality rate of sheltered homeless individuals. Same sort of potential weakness. It's a research study. We would have to read it, look deeply into it. Again, it's a very dense research study. We would want to see what their design was for the study, what their sampling procedure was. Was it a random sample? How big was the sample? Again, is there any inherent bias in the study? Who paid for the study? The statistic that it reports out, again, it has the potential of having the lack of absolute numbers. Of course, we could only know that if we look deeply into the research to see if they do report the numbers that the statistic is based on. And then finally, we don't know about Ranacardi, or again, I don't know how to pronounce the name, and the other researchers. They could be questionable authorities. We don't know their expertise or education, if they have any financial gain in reading the data in a certain way. Moving on to his fourth piece of evidence. This was in one extreme case, anti-camping ban activists carved out an exception in Utah's camping ban. So this is an objectively obtained observation. It's from the Utah's legal amendment. You can find it on the Utah's legislature website. Anytime that you offer an example, a case example of something that's objectively real, that's happened, and then you take that objective example and you interpret it to mean something, you do have the potential weakness of the logical fallacy of making a hasty generalization or causing anecdotal evidence. So with Devin, and I'm not saying that these are actual weaknesses, I'm just saying with the evidence he does provide, we would have to look closely at the evidence to make sure that they are not susceptible to any of these weaknesses. Okay, so that is Devin's argument. Moving on to the negative, to the con, Alec Vandenberg, he says no, camping bans are not an effective strategy to addressing homeless. How does he know that? His first piece of data is right here. 1 million people in the country annually experience homelessness for the first time. He's citing data, 1 million and first time. Again, potential weakness is, I don't know why I have potential weakness listed twice, oh well, is a lack of absolute numbers and proportion. So 1 million, we don't know, what does that look like? We know annually, we know that's a year, but we don't know in terms of those 1 million, what proportion that is of the overall population. I mean, it's still a huge amount of people, don't get me wrong. Moving on to a second piece of evidence, he says, who are disproportionately people of color. So if we click, like I said last video, if you click on disproportionately, you will go to a website that is citing an expert. Now, I have a little note here that the disproportionately isn't given any data stats to rest on, so we are relying solely on the opinion of someone who's claiming to be an expert on this issue, and they're not giving us any figures, any statistics or data. We're just taking their word for it because they're an expert. So again, the potential weakness here would be a questionable authority. Are they truly an expert? Do they have the education? Do they have the experience? Do they have any bias in their opinion? In other words, are they financially motivated, culturally or politically motivated to make these claims? Moving on to his third piece of evidence, it's no surprise that homelessness has risen for the 8th year in a row. Again, this is data, the 8th year in a row. 8th year in a row, We don't have any sort of proportion to compare that to. Does homelessness rise? Has it been rising, 10 years in a row previous to this or 2 years in a row previous? We don't know. So a lack of absolute numbers. Skip down here then to his fourth and fifth piece of evidence, both case examples. The first one, communities across the country, such as Dallas and Raleigh, North Carolina, are leading the way by investing in permanent housing and services to effectively and humanely solve the problems. Again, if you click on that link, you will go to the newspaper article, or I'm sorry, it's the news channel website. Again, we're providing one example here as an effective program. Anytime you just give an example to illustrate something which is objectively true, the example is true, but to interpret the example to mean what you mean it to mean could be an example of hasty generalization. With his fifth piece of evidence, he also provides another case example that reports out statistics and data as well. He says in Dallas, for example, thanks to public-private partnerships and financial commitments, the homelessness response system housed people directly from the streets and reduced unsheltered homelessness by 24% in just over 3 years from 2021 to 2024. Case example, again, providing this one example from Dallas. It is objectively true, real, it exists, but if we just take that one example and then interpret it or derive an opinion from it, we risk having a hasty generalization, the logical fallacy of hasty generalization. With both the statistic and the piece of data, we lack any absolute number or proportion. That then summarizes the potential weaknesses in Alex's argument in terms of his evidence. So in the next lesson, we're going to go back through both Devin and Alex's argument, and instead of looking at their evidence, we're now going to try to isolate reasons. So in lesson 4, we'll be isolating reasons. In the second half of lesson 4, we'll be isolating the potential weaknesses of reasons, which will involve those general weaknesses you read about in this lesson's notes. All right, hope that helps.